A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 72nd edition of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Week after week, we at Notebook have been privileged to host some of the most fantastic thought leaders and educators from across the world in what has become India's largest thought-sharing platform for education. We had started with a very small mission, that of making online education, online learning tools more familiar for our esteemed educators. Today, when I invite you to the 72nd episode, it fills me with immense pride to say that we have come a long way, that this event has taken a life of its own. And today, we are privileged and humbled by the support that we receive. For that, I have all of you to thank. We at Notebook are an EdTech brand. We make small, crisp videos for every topic pertaining to the CBSE syllabus. These videos come in handy in two places. First, teachers during their classes can make use of these videos to introduce the topics to their students. Students find it easier when you start off with a small video and they gain a visual understanding of the topic that would follow. What it also does is it gives students additional advantage of accessing these videos from home months later when they're preparing for their exams and do a quick revision of the topics. Not only is this a good way to revise, but it also helps them remember what exactly the teachers had taught on the day when this video was shown. What I will do now is I'll play a small clip of one of the notebook videos for you before we start with the session today.
Let's examine both the options and see which decision should be taken to successfully thrive with today's fierce market competition. Kapil was the CEO of a newspaper company round the world. He recruited 5 efficient staffs: Alisha, Bipasha, Aniket, Abhishek, and Srishti, for the growth and prosperity of his business. All 5 of them worked efficiently according to the task delegated by Kapil as a team and contributed their best effort to increase the productivity of the business. However, Alisha performed tremendously well by entwining her innovative ideas with principles of management. Thus, Kapil promoted Alisha as a senior most supervisor after his analysis of the overall market scenario, exemplified the proposal to distribute Sunday magazines along with the newspaper. Kapil was impressed with this idea, which helped Round the World emerge as a renowned newspaper. Kapil transferred Abhishek to Rajasthan, where there was a great need of an efficient manager like him. As a result, Abhishek felt motivated with more responsibilities and increased salary and contributed his efforts in a deliberate manner. In the meanwhile, the other employees, Bipasha, Srishti, and Aniket, became lethargic as they knew that in the next round they will definitely get a promotion. Hence, their competition spirit and productivity decreased. Kapil was unsatisfied and quite upset about their diminishing creativity and productivity. So, he had to tap for external sources for various positions through advertisement, direct recruitment, employment exchange, casual collars, campus recruitment, etc. Though it was lengthy and a costly source of recruitment, yet it proved to be beneficial as he found 2 highly qualified and talented concerns who possessed competition spirit, named Hina and Vikas. The entry of the new blood in the organization ensured higher productivity and fame of the newspaper round the world, as Bipasha, Srishti, and
Excuse me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a small clip from one of the notebook videos. This was from the topic of business studies. We have more than 10,000 such videos catering to students right from class 1 all the way up to class 12. So I do invite to visit our website, notebook.school, and try them out. Well, with that out of the way, it is now time
let's
to move on with the session today. Our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Barrett served the Doon School as Housemaster, Head of Department, Dean of Activities, Dean of Student Welfare, Deputy Headmaster, Second Master, and Acting Headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Burrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. Sir, privileged to have you with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Subayu, and a very good evening to you and Achin, Abhishek, and everyone at the Notebook team, as well as all our guests and our esteemed panelists who've joined us. So, the gap year, in my view, is a break from a course of studies just completed and before another course of studies starts. So, ideally, one would take a gap year after finishing class 12 and before joining graduate school, or also, if one likes, after one graduates and between that and the post graduation. Now, I'm a great believer in taking time off and doing what the Aboriginals called a walkabout. Now, before any big decision, before any big event, whether it's a college you join, or whether it's the course you do, or whether it's the job or marriage, all require some degree of consideration, a period of reflection before taking the next important step. And I think this is what the gap year provides. It provides a gap to reflect and then take the next step after some consideration. Now, a good example is Vikram Seth, who was a boy from Doon School. Now, he was studying at Berkeley and doing his economics. But then, as a part of his PhD thesis, he had to travel to China. And he stayed on there and he learned Mandarin. And he wrote probably his first book called From Heaven Lake. And he never returned to finish his PhD because from there, he became a writer. And after that, he wrote Golden Gate and the rest of it. So in fact, a gap year can shape one's life and put one on a life-changing path. In India, unfortunately, gap years after school are not common, and parents are against it. They want to see their children go straight from school into college because they don't want to lose a year. They feel it's a waste of time. Also, college admission departments in India don't understand what it means that candidates take a gap year. So when they apply for first year of college a year later, the admissions people might say, why are you applying a year later? What were you doing in this meantime? Yet abroad, it is a very done thing. And students after finishing school, do a gap year. They travel to another country. They do a lot of community service. And for example, in our school, we always had a couple of gap students every term who came in and added flavor and color to our community. They brought with them their own talents. Some were sportsmen, some were musicians, there were artists. These were all school leavers who came to give our school 6 months of their skill and time. And I got along very well with these gappers, and so did our students. These gappers were just a few years older than them. Now, this experience, I find that when an 18-year-old travels, the exposure that a gap year provides, it teaches them so much to fend for themselves. They also make a little pocket money. They make friends. And if nothing else, they decide on the next step, which college and which course. Now, I know many gappers have already decided on college and they have got into a college. But these, if you look at a gap student, in my experience of gap students, are that they are very, very mature, beyond their years, and they conduct themselves excellently. They seem to be 4 to 5 years older than the equivalent Indian student. And I had some gappers who were attached to my house as a tutor. And I took them on treks and hikes and also to the local restaurants to taste the cuisine. And some of them left behind great memories. They left behind their artwork, their music. And I know one boy from Australia was a fabulous football player. And we missed his football skills when he left. Travel and meeting people of different cultures and immersing oneself in an apprenticeship or even a job placement has excellent educational value. Also, when you take a gap year, you start college a year later. And I think starting a little later is better because you can grasp so much more. I wish I had done my post graduation in my 30s rather than do it at 24. I think you're older and probably wiser. Now, I think in India, some more students do a gap year after graduation rather than after school. For example, my own two children decided to do a gap year after college. So they both finished from Delhi St. Stephen's College. My son went on to teach in a public school, not mine, another public school in the east. This gave him very much needed pocket money, which he used for college. He made friends, he built a CV, he traveled, and he also studied for the MA entrance exam, which he got through. My daughter, on the other hand, after finishing school and college, worked in the IAYP Delhi office. She played national squash and soccer, and she also decided what her next step was. And she decided that it was not going to be in academics. And she took off to the University of Exeter to pursue a postgraduate degree in sports science. So these are two examples from my own family where I encourage them to take a gap year. Now, the gap year helps a student to build his CV. It also gives employers a better glimpse into who they are speaking to across the interview table. It is easier for universities to give you a place in a master's program if you have done 2 years of traveling, writing, working in corporates. You come to the table with a strong recommendation after a gap year. Now, gap years are not a waste of time, as many parents in this country believe. And I, for one, would consider very highly a student who had taken a gap year after school or college compared to one who has moved straight from school to college to graduation. I want to end this by saying that there's another gap year which I highly encourage teachers to take. And I call this gap year the sabbatical year. Now, technically, sabbatical would mean 7, a little rest after 7 years. But I would say that even after 10 years of working in any job, I think every one of us deserves a little break. We need to take these breaks to refresh our lives, to recharge our batteries, and to get away from the tedium of work. But I don't see schools encourage this. Now, at the Doon School, we had a very, very thought of sabbatical program. I, however, never availed of it, but a lot of teachers took a year off, went to a school abroad. We had to have an exchange teacher. So it was a reciprocal exchange where a teacher from that school came to us and we sent a teacher abroad. And they stayed there for a period of 6 months to 12 months. And they came back with an absolutely fresh outlook to life, a new perspective to their teaching. Some of them might want to write a book. Others might just want to take a trip down the Nile. Somebody might want to pursue their hobby in photography or music. It is very important for a teacher to have some avocation apart from a subject, because teaching is not something that you do for 3 years and forget about it. It's a long-term grind for 40 years, 30 to 40 years. And therefore, I encourage teachers to take gap years, take sabbatical years, go learn a foreign language, live in a foreign country, travel this country. There's so much to see in India. And write a book, meet people. And I think schools should build into their policies sabbaticals for their teachers. And I want to end with a story of a boy who I taught in school. He left the Doon School. He went to Chennai. He did his college. He then did very well at the IIM Ahmedabad and began working at Citibank London. And then he had this great wanderlust, which I could even sense when he was in my geography class in school. So he took a gap year from Citibank and trekked across the Atlas Mountains. He then went back to his job, made a little more money, trekked across Scandinavia, and his third trek was across Russia. He traveled the Trans-Siberian Railroad, bought a yak, traveled to Mount Kailas, and then came into India, where he taught in the Doon school for 6 months. He was my tutee. And then he continued his voyage and he was going to Australia when he dropped off at the Andamans. And he is now the CEO. He owns a company called Barefoot at Havelock Island. He married the diving instructor, who's his wife. They have 2 children. And this is a story of a wonderful young man who even wrote a book in his travels. It's now published in Penguin. It's called All the World's a Spittoon. Now, this is a gap year. This is a typical sabbatical year of a man who works, takes a break, continues working. And I highly encourage students to take gap years. And with that, I'm hand this over to you, Shabai.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think with a topic like gap year, this was a wonderfully positive start to today's session. The positive outcomes of what a gap year can look like. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker today is Achin Bhattacharyya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. He is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CPA Australia. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shubhai, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which is not only interesting, but the sheer thought of it brings a smile to our lips. The thought of taking an year off from our regular activities and living life on our own terms while pursuing our hobbies and interests is something that all of us would love to. In global context, gap year typically describes a year off between high school and college. Harvard, for instance, encourages admitted students to defer enrollment for 1 year, to travel, pursue a special project or activity, work, or spend time in another meaningful way, provided they do not enroll in a degree granting program at another college. Similarly, deferrals for 2-year obligatory military service that we see in many countries are also granted. Now, coming to the history of gap years, there's something very interesting. This concept of gap year was first implemented in 1949 after the Second World War. Arrangements were made for German youth to come to US for a year and stay with an American host family while completing high school, as a way for the younger emerging generations to help restore the trust and relationship between Germany and US that had broken during the war. The goal was to dislodge the post-war tension and to redevelop peaceful intercultural relationships and connections that had broken during the war. Now, these ideals of peace, reconciliation, intercultural learning that were valued during that time are still an essential part of the gap year, even today. So gap years are designed for personal growth. They allow students to make connection, help develop peaceful relation, and promote intercultural understanding in a way that cannot compare to what is taught in a classroom setting. It also gives opportunities to explore new careers, as Barrett mentioned, some great examples, learning new skills, and develop language competencies. Steve Jobs, the legendary co-founder, chief executive, and chairman of Apple, dropped out of college to spend a year in India. He famously spent months meditating in the mountains and learning how to tap into what was important to him. He went home and reimagined the world of technology with the invention of Mac. Now, gap year first became common, like it became a household name in 60s, where the young baby boom generation wanted to get away from the severity of war that their parents had faced. At first, the primary purpose of gap year was for countries to exchange cultural ideals in the hope of preventing future wars. Because if you look at the whole concept of, given the fact, in the backdrop of two successive world wars, so what many countries around the world had seen, especially Europe, Second World War, and even US later part joining the war, everybody roped in. So in the hope that exchange of cultural ideas, exchange of goodwill, knowing each other will prevent future wars, was one of the motivations behind the entire concept of gap year. There's no doubt that taking a gap year gives a person time to process all the emotions that comes with the transition. So naturally they feel less stressed when they go back to their regular routine. They're more prepared. You know, the whole discussion about maturity that Burrett was referring to. So students who use a gap year to refine their career prospects, be it post-school, before entering college, during college, or even young professionals, after a couple of years in job, taking a year off and pursuing their hobbies and interests. Definitely many of them feel better prepared after taking a year off. It's like you hit the pause button. You hit the pause button to find your purpose, to explore, to travel, and find a new you. So we mentioned about Steve Jobs. Incidentally, Steve Jobs was not the first person to visit India for a gap year. Well, I'm not referring to any direct link between the two, but few more examples. Mark Zuckerberg visited Nainital on Steve Jobs' advice in the early stages of Facebook. And here we are referring to examples of people taking a gap year in our own country. With so much to explore, traditional wealth of knowledge, Benedict Cumberbatch moved to Darjeeling after Harrow to teach Buddhist monks. 19-year-old Mother Teresa's trip to Darjeeling inspired her to build missionaries of charity. And the great journey started from there. The whole world took note. Feminist writer Gloria Steinem spent 2 years in India after college, helping young women organize against injustice. So India has always been a popular gap year destination. But the only gap year Indian students knew, until recently, was a year that many of them took off to prepare for medical or engineering entrance tests. But here we are discussing about the gap year, to explore, to travel, to breathe, and find ourselves in a new and much more exciting environment. Naturally, there are some concerns. Will it affect our college admissions? how will the colleges look at it? Positively or negatively? At times, students feel that, okay, I take a year off, but will I really find the answer that I'm looking forward to? Will I be able to discover or rediscover myself and come back more fresh with a more meaningful, objective, and purposeful outlook? Now, when it comes to finding oneself, I see it as knowing what you want. Sometimes many students go through school and college making others happy. Teachers are happy, parents are happy, and they cater to the larger system. And at the end of the journey, there's a huge void. So, how do they choose their next move? So, how do you know what is right for you? Birds are just now referred that 30 or 40 years of career. So, sir referred to teaching, be it any career for that matter. So, it's a long journey. Are we sure that this is the path that we want to embark on? There's a gap year allows students to take on self-exploratory activities. For instance, internships, short courses, traveling without the pressure of making commitments. Provides space for students to hear their own voice within and watch how they resonate with things, or for the matter if they don't. The answer may be a life-changing moment. Simply a realization of one's strength or weakness and setting the rhythm for the rest of the journey. Some famous examples, if we look at, and how people around the world have been benefited. For instance, Nigella Lawson, who worked as a chambermaid in Florence, where she discovered her love for Italian cooking. Dan Brown, who spent a year in Spain studying art history, which would become the subject of his best-selling books, including Da Vinci Code. Charles Darwin, whose theory of evolution was inspired by a trip to the Galapagos Island as a travel companion to naturalist Captain Robert Fitzroy. While a gap year does not guarantee such resounding success, it certainly allows students to move ahead with greater purpose and less stress. I guess some important ideas which can really help and which can really go a long way to ensure that a gap year really counts. We are able to achieve what we have set out for. First and foremost, pursuing something that you are passionate about. Suppose someone wants to work in films, write blogs, start a small business, work in a kitchen, or go for a trek to the mountains, take care of animals. So, pursuing a passion project without the pressure of making it a lifelong career or without the pressure of performing, making it a great success, is one of the biggest opportunities that a gap year can offer. Again, another very important aspect is learning any new skill or developing a hobby which becomes your lifelong companion. Be it learning a new language or learning something, a life-saving skill like cooking, diving, rock climbing. Suppose you have always been fond of and you always wanted to learn guitar, never got the opportunity. Or tennis. So things that may not become your career, but will provide you the balance that you may really need once you take on the pressure again, whether that be of studies or your career. There are structured gap year programs as well. Many universities abroad offer gap year programs, which includes activities like skill building, volunteering, traveling. Also, at times it gives an opportunity to meet people who are your role models. Go out, reach out to the world. Speak to people. Suppose you are looking at a particular career option, speak to people who are already pursuing that career, know from their experiences. If you really want to get an opportunity like that, again, I guess in our own country, of late, definitely this is increasing, but still, vis-a-vis global trend, very few students take the plunge. Naturally, there are challenges of expectation, challenges of performing, but that doesn't mean that if someone else is not doing it, that doesn't mean that a student will not explore it, right? There are challenges, there are issues. Odds are, for instance, that if they take a gap year, it may so happen that they won't come back to an economy trundling through a recession of historic proportions, but they might. If a student has already graduated and then takes a gap, will it affect his or her chances of getting a good placement? We have seen such challenges can happen, do happen. But then at any point of time, I guess it's really important to weigh the pros and cons, long-term versus short-term trade-offs. At times, delayed gratification is often touted as superior. So I remember that famous marshmallow psychology experiment in the 70s. Even if it's been mostly debunked, it sums up as one of the main questions of life. Would you rather have one marshmallow now or two later? Waiting for two isn't always the wiser choice. Now, why I'm discussing this, for instance, at times we may feel, okay, this is not the right time to take a gap year. Let me take up a job, work for 10 years, build a solid bank balance, and then take a year off. Yeah, it has its own pros and cons. But always, it may not be the most wiser choice. If you put off your gap year and you keep on deferring it, say till the end of your working life, till you are 65, you might not be able to go at all. There might be health issues, family obligations, or Micronesia could be underwater. On the other hand, if you invest the money you spend on a gap year now, you could easily have thousands more thanks to the magic of compound interest. Being more financially secure can afford the opportunity for other life-changing experiences down the road. Be it travel, charity, work, starting business, anything. Now, with many recent studies showing that students who participate in gap years, they feel more confident, and this has been proved. And not only historically in one country, but around the world. So I was going through some numbers. I was going through the numbers to see that what is the correlation between students who are participating in gap years and what has the response been? Like, how do they look at it? For instance, students who had chosen to take a gap year, there was a survey. There was a survey and they were asked about their motivations as to why did they at all in the first place take a gap year. Now, what are the top answers? First, to gain life experiences and grow personally. So 92% students responded that the objective was to gain life experiences and personal growth. 85%, now these are not, students had the option of choosing more than one checkbox. So 85% students also felt that travel and experiencing other cultures. Only 82% said that taking off from academic rigor. Also, very interesting, more than 50% said volunteering for good cause. Social service, donating your time is one of the reasons. So, and post taking a gap year, once they've taken the gap year, 98% said that gap year had actually helped them develop as a person. 96% found it increased their self-confidence. And more than 90% agreed that it had increased their communication skills. The fact that most of the times you're traveling, reaching out to new people, new cultures. So more than 90% said it increased their communication skills. Greater understanding of other cultures and making them global citizens. So I think these were some thoughts that I wanted to share with all of you. Again, when we discuss about gap year, I guess it's a much wider term. I was referring to gap year more from the perspective of taking a year off, mostly between school and college, or might be later on during higher education. There can be other issues in and around this as well. At times, it may not be voluntary due to circumstances. Students may health issues or other family concerns. Students may need to take a gap year, and that can happen even in school. So we have a very experienced and stellar panel today with wealth of experience, and I really look forward to hear from them with regard to their views on this particular topic. I thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. Over to you, Shubai.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. As Achin mentioned, the gap year has different ramifications with different students in different situations. We have heard so far from Barrett sir and from Achin how a gap year, a year off for a student can be a way to rejuvenate, can be a way to explore new avenues. However, for a lot of educators on the panel here, the gap year is also a challenge because it often deals with a student who has lost a year in school, reasons being academic or personal. Today, we have a stellar panel with us who are going to discuss the various aspects of what happens when a student loses a year of school. We have with us three eminent educators today, and it is now my privilege to introduce them to you one by one. We have with us Mrs. Suvir Kapoor. Ma'am belongs to Delhi and has been in the education industry for about 26 years now. Due to the frequent transfers of her husband, she has taught in various schools of Maharashtra and MP. And in 1999, she joined DPS Dwarka in Delhi and continued there till 2016. She was very popular with her students due to her friendly nature. And during this time, she authored the sample papers for Grade 10 English. She also conducted various workshops on English speaking and teaching methodologies. In 2016, she moved on to head DPS Jhansi for a while. Currently, she is working with the Podar group of schools, which is based in Mumbai and has over 130 schools and other institutions. She's been heading the Ratlam branch since 2018. She has also conducted CBSE workshops as a trainer, and she's an avid reader, a movie buff, a swimmer, and performs yoga too. But above all, she remains passionate about teaching her subject. Ma'am, absolute privilege to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. We have with us Mr. Sanjay Dutta, who is an economics honors graduate and a postgraduate in history. He has also got degrees in education and management. A keen sports person, he has played competitive tennis in his youth. A trained mountaineer, he now spends time riding horses and motorcycles, of which he has an enviable collection. He has experience of working on curriculum design for IGNOU National Open School and working at NCERT besides teaching postgraduate. He has a rich experience of working in boarding schools and is presently responsible for 3,500 students as a head in the 2 schools at Udaipur under the charitable initiatives of the royal family of Mewar. Sir, thank you so much for being here today. We have with us Mr. Chinmoy Banerjee, who is currently the CEO of Premier Academy in Nairobi, Kenya, and has over 32 years of experience in the education sector. His areas of expertise are curriculum development and moderation, education management, school college administration and management, strategic planning, brand management, human capital management, policy development, and client relationship management, careers and student counseling, among others. He began his career as a teacher in Nagaland in the year 1988 and has been a school leader since 1990, serving in the capacity of a headmaster, principal, and as the director of an education trust. He moved to Kutch in Gujarat in 1995 to serve as the headmaster of a school there and played a pivotal role in redeveloping and resurrecting the school. He moved to Kenya in 2009. He has mentored leaders and has established multiple schools right from scratch. He is a recipient of the District Award for Teachers from the government of Nagaland and also had the privilege of being nominated to the first Executive Council of Kutch University by His Excellency, the Governor of Gujarat. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for making the time. I will now stop my share, switch on my camera, and I would request you to do the same.
Hi, Shubhayu. Good to see you.
Hi, sir. Good to see you too. Thank you so much for being here.
You just hit one under the belt. You are not supposed to talk about my bikes. That's a passion I shared with you. But if the news reaches home, I had it.
Well, I hope your family members are not in attendance then. Mr. Banerjee, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for making the time. I know it's a little different in the time zone. Sir, your mic is on mute. Mrs. Kapoor, if you could please switch on your camera as well.
Shubhayu, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah. So who goes first?
Well, if I may start with Mr. Banerjee. He's our guest
Why not?
today from across an ocean.
Yes, why not?
Mr. Banerjee, as we were discussing yesterday, we are discussing the impact that losing a year would have on our students. You being in Kenya are often witness to students who moved when their parents moved to that country. And because of the difference in the education system in the two countries, the students are often caught in the middle. So would you like to shed some thought on that?
We have heard some wonderful thoughts expressed by the previous speakers, and they were very much in order. And yes, we do have cases where a gap year becomes evident. I mean, eminent. It becomes important. Now, I'll give you certain examples. You forget about the transfers from India that we receive. We receive transfers from all over the world. And wherever you don't have the academic calendar matching, it could be a couple of months. It need not be a year. But students need to take a break simply because they cannot be admitted. I've also had an example of a burnout. There are students, high performers, accelerated learners who push themselves so hard that after the IGCSEs, which we have at the end of year 11, and we have the A levels at year 13, they suffer an absolute burnout. So they go out to reinvent themselves. That's not the situation. Now, what I advise the parents is, when there is a break that their children are taking, that break, for the break, actually our primary school, also the children need to take a break in the sense that because the calendars do not match, and secondary school obviously. And then there's also a gap year that our A-level students, we have actually had cases where after year 11, which we call the O levels, students take a break and then they come in at year 12. Now, it is best for them to take the gap year if the student is extremely confident of not losing momentum. The key word here is they kind of lose that touch with the base, and then they lose the spirit. They may come back deflated, so that's very rarely the case. Junior students can go into various kinds of soft skill learnings, soft skill classes. They can go into computer lessons. They can learn skills. Most specifically, they can venture into sports, because I think one of the key areas that our children miss learning is deep involvement in sport and sporting activities. Clubs, for example, there are famous clubs that can actually create you from nothing. For example, people can join debating clubs, people can join mountaineering clubs, people can join trekking clubs, and there are the works that children can take part in when they move. There is also a fear that parents have. I've seen a lot of this, that is my child going to lose? I mean, what about a year that the child loses? And it mostly emanates from parents. Now, let me take you years back. I remember when I was a student, everybody used to crave for government jobs, and then government jobs had a retirement period of 60 years. And we used to work ourselves back. So we had to be a graduate at a particular age. And then otherwise, you lose your salary, you lose a years of provident fund, you lose your pension benefits. I mean, that fear, I think, has not yet totally gone out. People still feel that 1 year of loss, 1 year of loss, but people sometimes forget that 1 year is a short time to get a new human being. Okay? We also sometimes focus too much on the left side of the brain. You know, the right side of the brain is all about thinking of the big picture, putting things in perspective. It's about imagination, it's about philosophy, it's about feelings. Now, for these things to happen, you need to go out of the class. I need to spend time somewhere for that creativity to kick in. For example, J.K. Rowling, if I'm not mistaken, I think she was on a gap year in Portugal when she was actually creating Harry Potter. So this is what happens during a gap year. Now, as far as the secondary section is concerned, I've had cases where children actually learned programming, coding over a year and came back, and we admitted in year 12 because we don't end at year 12, we end at year 13. All right. So after year 11, the child goes on, learns coding, gets a certificate from Google or Microsoft, comes back, and then joins year 12. So that's how beneficial a gap year is. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question. If you have something else, I'll be very happy to answer.
Sure, sir. I'll come back to you. We have quite a few questions, so I'll keep on going around the table. Mr. Datta, if I may come to you next. Sir, gap years in your experience.
Well, Shubhayu, pardon me for being a little personal, but yesterday when I got your call to be on this, I wondered why you picked me up. Have you done more than enough research? You know my bikes. Let me tell you, I have had a gap year after school. And I wondered if you had noticed it somewhere in the CV, or probably somebody talked to you about it. Anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time and be with us. Evenings are usually a little tough for webinars. Everybody's had a long day, so I appreciate the 112 participants that I can see here. And I would like to make your time worth its while. Now, why do we take a gap year? I mean, ideally, you look at a kid in school, apart from what Mr. Chinmoy just pointed out, that, somebody migrating from one system to the other. So you have a kind of semester break and a country break, maybe a summer-bound school and a winter-bound school. So those would create some gap periods. Other than that, typically in a school scenario, a kid would have a break year if unfortunately he or she could not be promoted, which is no more the case. CC would just put you up. So everybody's got used to that. People have forgotten what it is to be left behind, So the Marines saying no one gets left behind, I think, has been truly implemented only in education. Nobody gets left behind. Grade E, welcome to the next class. This other was if you were a sports person and you missed 1 year. So that was another thing, that used to cause some of the students to, not take an exam. Very few serious sports people did it. Others, gave up the passion. And as they say, you trade your passion for glory. I quote the eye of the tiger. So people do that, and you just traded it and you carried on with your classes and you forgoed the tournament. The another reason why anybody takes a break out here is when you have passed out of class 12th and you take what is called as a drop. So kids take a drop, and there are career coaches who will tell you that if you're planning for an entrance, make sure you have a plan A, B, and C, so that if you don't get into the top-notch college where you want to be, there is a plan, safety net of plan B and C, so that you don't lose a year. So the entire, and my thoughts resonated with Mr. Banerjee when he said so that, you calculated yourself backwards, in terms of your PF. Now that is very accurate calculations, accounting, I would say, but it also points to the fact how we see the equivalence in monetary terms to 1 year of service. And yes, it was important at one point in time, but certainly to the centennials and the millennials, that doesn't matter. The salaries are very rich. So that cannot be the reason for them to quickly get into a job. Yes, there was a time when education was a struggle. You spend another year in college and your parents won't be able to afford it. That is still true for certain classes, the economically weaker and backward society, but then not for the vast majority which we are addressing at this point of time. So then what stops people from having a gap year? Now, one is not knowing what to do with it. Second, even if you need it, like many other things, including psychological counseling and aid, not recognizing the importance of a break. There was talk of burnout. Barrett sir talked about people traveling the world. All that's true, but how recognized it is, how well recognized is this need is the question. Because even if a student was to express this need, it would very quickly be suppressed by somebody wiser. They would say, oh, take a small break, do this, do that, and you'd be fine. You'd be all right. So come back. They would not allow you to do it. The society does not put a premium on that, on your individual expressed desire of a break. You know, it's the word sabbatical that was used by Professor Barrett. How many are actually taking a sabbatical? And how many are well conversant with what is a hiatus? Are we even talking about it? If these are words, they must be having a reason for being coined. And they have a value and a purpose. And to my mind, the greatest value and purpose can be self-discovery. Because when you are a student, you are constantly looking at your grades. You are against the clock. There is a date on which you will have an exam, and there is a syllabi to be completed. Where is the time? As W.H. Davies had said, where is the time to stop and stare? What is life full of care if we have no time to stop and stare? And he compares it to cows and sheep. So you're worse than that in that regard, that you do not have that luxury. So the importance of that is widely understated. I mean, look at the value of leaving a grass pitch unplayed. You know, you have matches being played side by side, you have the pitches. Why don't you use the same pitch day in, day out? It would wear out, it would crack. Why do we not allow that to our kids? But I'm very happy that this new education policy has recognized that. And it is talking about creating a credit bank where they will allow children to leave education system for a while. Their credits will stay in the repository, and when they come back, they can pick up from where they left. So that's A, for people who cannot economically afford a continuous period of study. Secondly, if you get mentally tired, if you get completely fagged out, you have an option of taking a break and come back and complete a degree which would in no way be looked upon by your future employers as of less worth than somebody who did it in, let's say, 3 years or 4 years straight. So that wisdom will have to be on the part, that maturity and wisdom has to come on the part of the employers, the professors, the career coaches, to let the word around that a guy doing a degree in 4 years and doing it in 3 years is just the same. And it is not essentially because somebody failed a particular year. It was because somebody wanted to have better grades after a year. So we will have to change that mindset. And if you remember, in my last visit to Notebook, I did talk about George Foreman. And as I grow older, I think I become more and more fan of the chap, more than Ali, who was earlier our favorite, for the simple reason that he took 20 long years to come back and regain his heavyweight title. What a break can do to a man. Here was somebody who was mocked as a washerwoman by Ali, famously or infamously, who changed his style to cross guard completely with age and knew how to evade and then regain his title. So sometimes, I mean, of course, he went off for a different reason. He went on to help children and, you know, set up churches and do a missionary job. But then what evolution of a man's maturity in terms of tactics and determination to be able to come back after that long. So for people who are scared that if they are at the top of their game and if they take a break, maybe they will never get a chance again. Here are opposites of people who have done completely different. So I say there is no need to be scared that whether the world will accept you when you come back or not. Take a break anyways, And I'm sure, as they say, that, all you need to be yourself and the world will adjust. So that's my view and take on this. And I'll share the personal benefits that I had from a break later in the conversation, if time permits.
Sure thing, sir. It has long been my belief that if you need stellar examples of anything, turn to the world of sports. And I think this whole period, the theme of taking a gap and reinventing themselves has happened many times over. Mrs. Kapoor, if we may come to you now. Suvir ma'am, we are not seeing. Okay.
Hi, good
Yes, ma'am.
evening. So my ideas about taking a gap year, would be, I mean, of course, it's a very exhaustive topic, and everyone has said whatever there had to be said about the advantages of it or the people who benefited from it. Now, what we forget that we only shared the success stories. What about the people who did not make it back? Because it's very good to say that, okay, I felt the burnout, I took the year off, and then, I came back rejuvenated. And, we have hundreds of success stories. But what about those who did not make it? Nobody talks about failures. And that is what is, most disturbing in today's scenario. When we are talking to children, when we are addressing, we are only talking about winners. Everyone prepares you for a winning streak. Nobody prepares you for failure. Nobody will tell you that, things can go wrong. It's all right if things go wrong. Now, a gap year, again, I would say that it's a stigma in our society, especially Indian society, because of the mindset. But at the same time, what about these millennials, as they are called, today's generation learners? Now, these children are at an advantage, okay? Financially, they are well off because their parents had struggled, and, they are all earning high salary. And there is no sense of responsibility that has been given to them. So they are free to do whatever they want to. And they have loads of money to, splurge on their parents' behalf. And because parents are of the belief, oh, my child will do what I never did in my life. And out of those sheer guilt, we keep on giving without realizing that the generation today is not learning accountability. One thing. And the second thing is that there is no sense of responsibility. You take a gap year, but tell them that you have to prove, you have to tell what you learned. And then it has to be somehow quantified in terms of, tangible returns, I would say. So this pandemic, of course, it forced everyone to take a gap year, I would say. I mean, as a school principal, I can vouch for it that it wasn't very easy initially for the students and for the teachers to be cooped up in one place in front of the TV or in front of your computers and iPhones or whatever. We were always advocating that this is not good for your eyes and you should not be exploring net so much, and you should read more and you should do that more. What we realized that this had made the whole world very small. Everyone was thrown in together. So the families, the children were exposed to a lot of parental fights and a lot of adult talk that they should not have been exposed to. And so this added a very different perspective to their, formative years, I would say. So the global homeschooling, it has some inspirational moments also, some angry moments, some fun moments, and some frustrating moments as well. But it seems very unlikely that on an average replace the learning is lost from school. So the bigger point is that this substantial disparities between family in the extent to which they can help their children learn. Key difference includes the amount of time available to devote it to teaching, the non-cognitive skills of the parent, resources, and also the amount of knowledge. It's hard to help your child learn something that you may not understand yourself. So, of course, I'm going slightly away from what everybody else has spoken, but my key focus right now is that what happens when you are forced to do something you are not prepared for. So this pandemic had taught us that yes, we all understand the importance of taking the gap year. So it was, of course, to experience a different culture, you learn a new language, and you develop a new life skill, and you discover your hidden passion, you prep for college, you improve yourself, you live life to the fullest and boost your job prospects. And also, the classroom walls that have been broken around you. So the structured living that children were doing until now, that has been broken, and there are no accountability left. And they had fun, and of course a lot of stress is being given to fun these days, but at what cost? My only sort of request to you all would be, would someone throw light on two aspects of life? What about those who go out on gap years, and and then they become so irresponsible that, okay, fine, my life is only about having fun and enjoying my life, never mind at parents cost or at somebody else's cost, somebody else will foot my bills. Okay. And then what about those parents who had shelled their hard earned money in order to give their children what they had to give, and the children, instead of having a molded life or a better life because of the gap year, what if they fail in that life? What kind of message are we giving? It's very good that you should have this and you should do that, but do the children of today, do they really require this kind of course, when we talk about us, we've had a very harsh life in because when we were growing up, of course, there was money was less, and a lot of other whole lot of problems. While we were working, we had to struggle to make both ends meet. But do today's children, what about those children? Earlier, I was teaching in a bigger school. Okay, DPS Dwarka was a very big school where we had all the children coming from very, very rich background. And the sense of responsibility was zero. Accountability was zero. Now I'm stuck in a place called Ratlam, which is very small. And again, the sense of responsibility is zero again, not because the parents can afford, but because the children feel कि पढ़ के करना क्या है, हमें अपने पापा की दुकान ही पे तो बैठना है. So what exactly is it that this gap year is going to, teach these children? How is it going to motivate these children, or making them a better, citizen, I would say, more responsible? I'm sorry if my views are a little different from, everybody else, but I've been listening to everybody, and I had a very different, charter that I had prepared, that what I'm going to speak. But after I heard everyone, I thought that no, there is no point in talking what everybody else has already spoken about. Now, let me ask about the failure, the story of the failures. What about those children who, come back saying, ki, "Haan, theek hai, my life is only about enjoying. Hai mere baap ke paas crore rupaye, why do I need to earn? My life is only about enjoyment. To hell with everybody else.
Sure, why you want me to take that?
And be merry in life."
Sure, sir, go for it.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Just for the sake of making the discussion more interesting and livid,
Right.
that's a very fresh view. But ma'am Suvir, in all honesty, the reason why I personally, as I said that yesterday we had a chat and today there were 3 back-to-back events, and here am I talking about a topic which, doesn't have any academic or research background, says X number of students have taken a break and gone on to do this. So take a break, because homeschooling is something that now has some data to back it. Now, this gap year is something that I think Achin picked up today, or Shubhayu, you picked up, because this year you will have some forced dropouts. Now, as I said, going back to why did in our days, let's say, if we were to be of the same similar age bracket, why did somebody take a break? It was because somebody failed, somebody had to go for a sports event, somebody could not crack an entrance. Now, as I think you use the word stigma, the reason why I talk in favor of this today is to take off that pressure from the kids, which forced them to end their lives because they could not crack an exam. We see that here in Rajasthan, in the southern part. Now, it's just to take away that shame and stigma and to save lives that I say that if somebody is forced into taking a break, and I said that in the beginning, so it's not a correction now, that people crack. So here is somebody who is trying to do an exam, is on the last day realizes I'm not up to it. What counseling would you give that kid? Take an exam 6 months down the line through National Open School, or go ahead and bang your head into that exam tomorrow morning, because while you may not be mentally prepared, your parents have invested in you. It's a do or die situation. Do it. So I think for those kids is what we are talking about. The pandemic will force a lot of kids to fall through the cracks. There will be parents who will not be able to pay up the fee. There will be children who have missed a complete year of academics. And this debate, mind you, is going to come back now in the national stage. Should you promote a kid who has not attended your classes? That's the next debate that's going to come. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to tell them, no, you can't lose a year, we'll promote you and you cope up with 2 years of academics in one? I think they will be forced into a gap year. And then the shame of having to sit with your juniors in school, one year is a very long time. So while yesterday you had somebody you called in your language as junies, today you are supposed to go and sit with them. How do you mentally prepare a kid like that? In my counseling sessions, I often try and do that by telling them that, look, when you are gonna be 60, would it matter whether you passed your board in 2021 or 22? It wouldn't. Simple reason being, I don't want him to go for something he's not prepared. So you have to counsel them. The parents want them to go. They themselves, because of the shame and stigma attached, want to go for it, but you know the result. You know what awaits them. So I think our effort this evening is not to promote people going on vacations and lose responsibility completely and say that, well, I've done it for a year, I can do. Yes, those are examples of people falling through the cracks and who are never able to come back. And I had that here jotted down, that in tennis, there were people who left at the very top thinking that they will come back, and they were never able to come back. Mats Wilander was an excellent example, world number one, losing to Ramesh Krishnan in the French Open and never coming back. Gone, finished, career's over. The guy was at the top of his game. So there are examples like that, and we certainly do not wish to, I certainly do not advocate, I can't say for everybody, I don't advocate that, kids should be made irresponsible and given 1 year off or 2 years off, and, they get into that habit and slumber and lose their skills and discipline, something that has happened to them in the pandemic. But yes, if they're forced by circumstances, allow them to use it to clear their head, take time and research what they want to do, and find their calling. Utilize that gap into something positive rather than look at it as a year lost. That is my personal take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir,
for making that point out. But there is a lot of difference in what we are talking here about, taking a year off deliberately at the age where you can take your own decisions. Let's say around 18 or 19, I think you're mature enough. And when we're talking about school children, by force who have to sit at home because their parents could not afford the fees for the whole year, we also are telling them the same thing, that okay, fine, if you've not paid the fees, it's all right, next year your child can repeat the class, but we are not going to promote the child if he had not studied now. And they're telling us also that madam, 2 mahine aap padha lijiye, we will pay the fees, and you promote our child कि नहीं हम साल तो रिपीट नहीं करवाएंगे. Of course, those kind of you can say requests even we keep having, and we keep refusing them categorically. But taking the gap year in school years and at college level are two different things, because in school only their parents are allowed to make decisions for them. We do not even allow our small children to decide whether they want to have dinner tonight or not. Nahi, maine dal banai hai, tumhe khana hi hai. And if you don't eat it, 2 thappad will be given to you. How dare you not eat the dinner? And you demand pizza today when I have prepared food at home. So when children are not allowed to make even small decisions for themselves, this pandemic had, of course, forced the children to go for a gap year. I get it. But going on a year, I mean, taking year off for gallivanting around, enjoying the world, and coming back all successful and happy. I'm sorry, we are only talking about the 1% or 2% of the people. Thank you so much.
I will get across to Mr. Banerjee for a particular question that I've been thinking in my head since Sanjay sir spoke about that issue about joining a set of juniors, right? If I have to go back to my school days, the thing about a senior guy who's flunked a year and then joining our batch, and I'll admit to it, we have been insensitive as kids, meeting out the same treatment whether somebody lost a year because of academic reasons or because of certain family issues. Mr. Banerjee, how do you deal with that situation when this student is back after a gap year?
Yeah. If I can I say something concerning
Sure, sir.
what Madam
Yeah,
has talked about
surely, sir.
before I answer your question. I think some of our apprehensions are very right, but we need to, a gap year is basically a voluntary action. The situation at hand she's talking about, the COVID scenario, is a disruptor. Okay. So, I mean, a gap year would be basically, there are two reasons that you take a gap year. One is for your own self-discovery, and that's usually at the higher level. And when your semesters do not match, that's a compulsion. All right. Now, this COVID scenario is actually a compulsion. Now, if we have to go a bit deeper, I think many of us have actually failed to conduct parent inserts to teach proper parenting. All right. Now, there's a book by Angela Duckworth. It's called Grit. I think parents need to learn how to kind of pass on tough love. Okay, teach resilience in the kids. And what she has actually observed is a lack of resilience in the kids, a lack of tough love leading to lack of accountability, lack of discipline. And then you come back after this whole gap, which is basically a disruptor, more agitated, more frustrated. You have got a discipline issue at hand, because we have been running school for the last, we have started in the September term. I mean, it's quite a few months that we have been running school. And our learning was never disrupted, because it's a well-to-do community and all of them had the virtual learning and they had the devices. But this is not the scenario everywhere, you know. So this is what I wanted to, I think her apprehensions were very valid, and she has actually focused on the cons of a possible gap year. Though her percentage that she quoted, the success rate of gap year was, I mean, there are more success stories than failures. And there is also Gap Year Association, which help you find gap year projects. Now, to answer your question, you know, only people who are resilient enough will take a gap year. It's not an activity for any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Let me tell you. You have taken a gap year because you need to go, you need to learn about yourself. You need to do something that you thought you did not have time for. All right. And these guys, when they come back, for lack of a better word, they give a damn to what other people talk about. Okay. You might, it's the school which is admitting. So if the school is admitting an elderly person, after a lot of deliberation, we don't just, it's not a free for all. Like, it's not part of our school policy that, yeah, everybody after IGCSEs, you go for a gap year, come back, and that's how, I mean, no school or university can run like that. Okay. So we do a lot of deliberation, and these kind of children who come back, they are mature enough. They have actually gained the maturity to deal with the juniors. The difference is not that high. I mean, not that great. We are not in that age anymore that your classes are fixed to the year groups, because learning can also begin at 58 or 59. Learning, I mean, the whole concept of learning has changed.
So we also have children in year 1, which is actually a 5.5-year-old. For a 5.5-year-old, we have got 7-year-old kids in year 1, because the parents decided that they want to spend more time, life skills and Montessori and early years. And these guys come back and fit well. Okay, it all depends on the person. It doesn't depend on the class. It depends on the person who is actually returning back from a gap year. His ability to deal with situations may see an improve, or just like Madam said, I mean, he may go on a decline, which is very rarely the case. And if his maturity actually is good enough, if he has matured well, we have not seen any problem. We have not seen any problem. There has been a very good adaptation. So that's what my experience is.
Wonderful. Sanjay sir, would you say the same? Because in the Indian context, I am still talking about the forced gaps, not so much the voluntary gaps as such.
As I said, the forced gaps, you only need to mentally make them all right with it. Because as I said, it's going to be the fear demoralization and somebody giving up on it completely, which needs to be covered. Because if it is forced, if it is not voluntary, then you know that somebody is not to be blamed for it. And we don't take a very kind view of people, not conforming. So even if it was not a question of responsibility, it's a question of, not following the norm. That somebody's been, let's say, I mean, I have a kid that I knock with in tennis, and he goes to Australia for his training, and he misses school. He's a student of one of the schools here. And his examination, if the school can accommodate, does. If they cannot, then he has to stay back. But he's very keen on his tennis. So, well, that doesn't make him irresponsible. It's just so that the timing of the tournaments and everything doesn't fit. So that's one quality. That's one type of missing. The other is that, as you said, for reasons beyond the control of the student. I mean, I say that I have, fortunately, it's a topic that I have often encountered in my counseling sessions. And I say that, you will not be jailed to write Pilgrim's Progress as John Bunyan did, or for you to become O. Henry. You don't essentially have to get imprisoned. But then, well, if you have landed there for some reason, might as well write a book.
Yeah. Sound advice there. Suvir ma'am, your experience with people coming back after a gap year. I'm not talking about the voluntary ones that I think Mr. Banerjee addressed very well, but more the involuntary ones.
All right. So I have been in this profession, as I told you, for the last 26 years now. So I have met a few students of mine who have taken a year off, or have decided, that they need some time off to decide actually what they want to pursue in life. And some of them are very happy, and some of them are not so happy. So, as you know, every coin has two sides of the story. So, again, validating the success story, my own son, he decided, he was working for an MNC after doing his graduation, and he did it for a year, and he says, no, I don't want to do this. E&Y is not my cup of tea. I need to rethink what I have to do. So he left the job, and then he decided, when he went to Kailash Mansarovar, and he did all that trek. And then he came back and he says, I want to now go for Teach for India. So 2 years he did Teach for India. And after that, he, actually understood what he has to do. And then again, of course, he went to Australia, finished his master's, came back and started working for another MNC now. So he's more focused and has more, you can say, balance, and has a very good perspective towards life. And these kind of, you can say, different experiences has given him a very beautiful perspective and has matured him at so many levels. But then there is another student of mine who is, again, like a son to me. And he went to Singapore, I guess. Yeah, he went to Singapore. And again, by the time he could finally make it, he was already late. So the whole year he stayed there so that he can join after 6 months the college, because it was a semester system. So after 6 months, when he joined, in those 6 months that he missed out, he got into drinking, he got into smoking, he got into, you know, all kind of various things. And it was like a vicious circle, and he could not get out of it for quite some time. The parents had to get the child back, put him in a rehab, and then, you know, his life had to start all over again. So these are the two scenarios that I have told you. It happens so many times. And a very close friend of mine whose, you know, son, he was doing very well when he was working in Bangalore. The mother wanted the child back in Delhi, and somehow the child came back to Delhi. And after coming back to Delhi, he realized, okay, I mean, you know, whatever money I'm earning, I can easily save and just blow it away. So he started blowing away the money. And in order to blow away the money, he started taking off from the work. And once when he started taking off from work, he got into the habit of, you know, becoming a shirker at work. I'm sick today and I'm not well today. And, you know, he would do whatever. So ultimately, he had to leave the job. And for the last 3 years or so, he's totally jobless and still doesn't feel like going back to work. So it's not always that, you know, it works. It works in some cases and it doesn't work in certain cases. So it's just, you're lucky. If you're lucky, you get the right perspective. And if you are not that lucky, then again, you fall through the cracks, as we were just discussing. And also, everybody doesn't get a very good experience when they travel abroad. Some of them have very cruel stories to narrate also, because a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old going all by himself outside, we all know all kind of things happen to children. So there are some gory stories also, which I don't think this is the platform where I would like to share them. But then yes, a lot of things happened to my girl students when they went abroad on a vacation, also on a group, you know, those travel group where they take the children. So a lot of, you can say, security issues come into play when we are talking about it. And not just girls, but even boys can be victimized in this manner. So I would say that taking a gap year has to be, you know, with a lot of responsibility and with a lot of care and with a lot of responsibility and care. When I talk about, the parents have to make sure that it should not happen very early in life, because when children are at an impressionable age, they do get influenced by wrong things, and that can, you know, be very detrimental for the rest of their future. So we should have to weigh and vary our pros and cons before we, you know, take this. Of course, when you do it at, you know, at a later age in life, when you already have achieved what you had to achieve, then of course it makes a lot of sense. But earlier, I've had a very, you can say, bad experiences that my students and some of the children or some of the parents have shared with me. So I'm quite wary on that account, that the younger ones especially should not be, you know, subjected to this torture. Sometime parents can spare it if they can, because every time it is not a happy story. It's not a happy ending for everyone. Thank you so much.
I think that's the beauty of a panel discussion. We get views center to the left and to the right. Mr. Banerjee, I think you wanted to say something. You wanted to add something there?
Yeah, Shubha, just I wanted to add my experience when students return, like the gap year that you are defining, the so-called gap year. I think the academics should take a back seat when they start off. Mental health is key, because we have seen a lot of anguish, we have seen a lot of fear, we have seen a lot of frustration, we have seen ill-tempered children. We have children who have become obese because of lack of activity. We have children with lack of attention. So that's one of the key advice, pieces of advice that I wanted to give to all the audience here, because they're all educators. Because the academic grades should take a back seat. All right. Focus on mental health, and through focusing on mental health, you can focus on their skills and competencies, which will later lead to them performing well. Second is, Madam has been saying about students getting drawn into vices. They can also get drawn into vices when still in regular school. You know, so things can happen. Failure and success, yes. it's not purely luck, it's also kind of within us. So that's why I was talking about even tough love and parenting, that, resilience is actually key. We have lost resilience. We have mollycoddled our children so much. We have got a group of parents who mollycoddle their children, and these children are not fits in any tough environment. So that is where your parental insights, your parenting skills, schools need to focus on, actually continuously engage with parents to actually build this. That was my take.
Wonderful, sir. So from the discussion so far, this is the sense that I'm getting, right? That the gap year is typically like a magnifying lens. It can be a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle, depending pretty much on the individual's, let's say, the build up to that point of a gap year. If they choose to, it can reap phenomenal benefits. If they choose to, it can take them down a spiral, uh, which is an interesting construct as it is. My last question: that today, when we are standing with the schools about to reopen in India, I know in Kenya they have already been operational for a while. Uh, we have seen a year of where blended learning has become a reality. We have been talking about technology aided education for a while now. UGC had a 2 p.m. show on Doordarshan way back about decades ago. But today it's a reality. Today, parents believe that learning can happen on a laptop screen, on a mobile phone screen. Uh, is a gap year still necessarily a gap, so to say? Or today, given the technological access, can somebody continue having that year off and continue their education just like that?
Do
Sanjay
you
sir,
want
would you
me
like
to
to go first? Yeah.
Yeah.
you want me to say, or Mr. Sanjay? Or...
Whoever. Go ahead, Mr. Chinmoy, please go ahead.
Okay. um, you know People say that disrupt or be disrupted. So blended learning is here to stay. It's nowhere to go. And at the same time, let me tell you that face-to-face interaction goes nowhere, because human beings can never be replaced. You cannot have those social skills. You cannot. A computer cannot feel empathy. Cannot see your emotions. Cannot see you smile. And that I cannot. The computer cannot pat you on the back. So yes, blended learning is here to stay. And you asked a very nice question. Can such kind of learning continue even during this gap year? I think it continued. I don't know about the situation in India, but here we were totally full school. I mean, it was totally a virtual classes, and actually, students developed new skills, students learned, and the students progressed. The transition also was not affected. So I'm not very familiar with the situation in India, uh, but here we continuously taught, and we actually found out better avenues for children who are actually who learn, the audiovisual learners, children who learn through colors, through presentations, through audio, through videos. So I think it worked, and it can work even when children go on a deliberate gap year, if they choose to do so. Like I said, it will all depend on the person first. All right.
Wonderful, sir. Suvir ma'am, if I may come to you next.
Yeah. So again, as sir was saying, that blended learning, we were talking about it, and the pandemic had forced it on us, and we all, I would say, emerged brilliantly well out of it, because everywhere in India, all the schools were running lovely classes online. Of course, there were some initial hitches from the parents' side. Some could not afford the mobile, and some thought that mobile is going to, sort of have a lot of effect on the eyes of the children, and again, the children are going to explore a lot of, you know um, the sites that they should not be visiting otherwise. But we realized that over a period of time, everyone, sort of tied over that that problem initially which parents were facing, and slowly they realized that yes, learning can happen on a screen as well. And what we realized that initially we were struggling to teach children so many words and so many things to do. Now, in these 6 months or in the last 8 months, because April onwards, we have been running our classes right from 2nd April, the day the new session began. We began our online classes. And of course, our group has been sending us regular PPTs and regular video or audio visual recordings and worksheets as well. So it never stopped for us. And what we realize now at the end of it, all the children are tech savvy. They all know how to download the question paper, finish it and upload the answers also, how to make their own PPTs, how to present their screen, how to mute, unmute themselves, and all the other things which were not possible earlier. Now they all know what all sites they can visit. In fact, they come and tell us, ma'am, us site pe ye wali baat ho rahi thi. And then they want to talk about the budgets. They want to talk about all the other various activities that are happening around them, because they have become so, I would say, agile, and they are becoming so aware, because all the time they're hearing these kind of things thrown around their parents so much. As I was talking about the adult talks, so it's not only the wrong things, even the right things. The children now want to talk about all the related issues. They want to talk about politics, they want to talk about the economic problems that the country is facing, the Kisan rally, all the other things which earlier children were very passive about, because they were not really interested in all these kind of things. So yes, technology has helped us a lot in this way. But again, as sir was talking about, the essential human touch, that of course cannot be replaced by the screens. Because when we are having one-to-one discussion with the children, we realize after a while, they say, ma'am, when can we come to school? We really miss the school. So they would sit in the uniform, they would sit there, and after every 10-15 days, they would inevitably come back to me and say, ma'am, when can we come to school? Ma'am, please let us come to school. Ma'am, we really miss you. Ma'am, we really miss our friends. We really miss, our canteen, all the little things, the water coolers we miss. Ma'am, we wish the washroom. Ma'am, we miss our buses. Ma'am, we even miss the didis. So it's such cute things they will come up with. So let's hope that, this thing, the forced exile from away from the school, it ends soon, and our children are given back to us, where we can literally talk to them and be with them and enjoy their happiness and be a part of their growing up years. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Sanjay sir, I saved you for last because I'm not only going to ask you to answer this question, but we would also like to hear about your gap year, if you're okay.
It's
talking about it.
6:33 in the evening, and your number of attendees is falling by the minute. So I don't want people, we'll keep that for some other time. But I will definitely like to talk about it, because it was something that was conscious, and it was, I would say it was brave, because, back then it was unheard of. And economy didn't allow you to do it. Wisdom did not. So it has by and large shaped my career and helped me be what I am today. But I think we'll keep it for some other time, Shubhayu. Coming back to your today's topic, the technology certainly should not be allowed to lapse. So students who are not able to attend school, take exams, I think we should take use of this blended learning now. We should make use of this technology and make it available. Let's say in India, you have schools closing for too much of heat, too much of cold, floods. I mean, name anything and teaching is disrupted. So I think that aspect can be very well covered now with the kind of capacities we have built. I think there is unanimity on the idea that nothing can replace a human interaction. So there is absolutely no chance that, this kind of forced situation would prevail for too long. As Ma'am Suvir said, kids miss school, they miss each other's company. There's a lot of peer learning that happens. So all that I know is something that will never go. If that goes out of learning or school, well, you would have very, very dry subject of studies, and that's all. So I think we are in no danger of being outgunned by the bots. We are on very solid firma, we're on terra firma, and we are waiting for kids to come back. From Monday, we will have our 6th to 8th kids. We have presently 9 to 12. And I'm sure that life will limp back to normalcy. So good luck to everyone. And it was excellent being here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Banerjee, Suvir ma'am, Sanjay sir, thank you so much. This has been one of the most fantastic discussions that we've had. Thank you so much for making the time. I will now hand this over to Achin for the vote of thanks. And Achin, I'm sure you have quite a bit to thank for. So go for it.
Yeah, really wonderful session. I must appreciate. Barrett sir, some great examples you gave, and I think it really helped to start the discussion on a very positive note, starting from the likes of experiences of Bikram Seth that you shared. And another very important aspect that you told us that it's not only about students, but also about like teachers at times. You know, teaching indeed 30 to 40 years at a stretch is taxing, like any other serious profession. And the way you put that across, like taking a year off, maybe going abroad, teaching in some other school, traveling, writing a book. So this the entire concept of sabbatical, taking a year off, I guess it really adds value. It enriches you further as a person. So I think some great thoughts you shared. Suvir ma'am, I really appreciate and thank you for sharing your honest views, and especially highlighting the challenges. And of course, as we all understand that there are two sides of any coin, the pros and cons. Very happy to know about your son, the choices that he made, and how it really helped him. You know, I'm sure it's a source of motivation, inspiration to everyone who is here today. Like, you know, real example. Chinmoy sir, I think one very, very important statement from you, which is one of the takeaways of the evening, and you emphasized on this time and again, and I couldn't agree with you more on this. The outcome of taking a gap year and how he or she is being able to adjust, whether it be voluntary or involuntary, depends by and large on the maturity and ability of the concerned person. I completely agree with you on that. Of course, as a civil society, I guess all of us also need to be more mature, more receptive towards it. But yes, by and large, it really depends on the candidate concerned. Great to know about certain other aspects that you highlighted, very practical ones, like students migrating between countries, different academic calendars, and how it affects. And yes, you know, the kind of fascination that an entire generation had about government jobs, and it was, and what you really shared with us is something that we also have definitely heard from our parents and grandparents. It's completely true what you shared with us. Sanjay sir, some great examples you shared with all of us. Really, with regard to hearing about your gap year, we keep it for some other session, but of course we would like to do that as team. I'm sure it's very interesting. And a great example that you cited, you know, when you started the entire deliberation on your part, which I guess is really the spirit of the evening. You spoke about George Foreman. So I guess one of my all-time favorites as well. Coming back at the age of 38 after 10 years being out of the ring in 1987, and in 1994 being able to win the world championship. If my memory serves me correct, he defeated Michael Mewar, who earlier had beaten Holyfield. So both IBF as well as WBA title in Las Vegas, Nevada. So I think really a great example of mental strength, resolve, and the fact that someone who lost his title 2 decades back to Muhammad Ali, coming back and winning it and showing that yes, it can be done. So really great example, a source of inspiration, I must say, a very appropriate example. So we really had a fantastic session. I thank all of you for your time. I thank members of the esteemed audience for being with us here today evening. In fact, it has been your support that has really helped us to take Together for Education webinar to the next level. I thank all of you again. Take care.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, my co-panelists. And thank you to the audience who've been so patient and made all this worth its while. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Take care and good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.